Hello everyone, it's great to see you. Before we get started, I'd like to say that if you like this video, please like the video, and would love for you to subscribe and stick around for more content. Just hang out, join this little community, and chat games. Today, I want to talk about Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition. This game was developed and published by Capcom, who throughout most of the PlayStation 4 generation and now PS5, I think it's just really been crushing it as a publisher and as a developer. Everything that I know about Capcom, at least, has indicated that they're really following the feedback in terms of what their fans are looking for out of their games. They're supporting their developers, their directors, their studios in kind of creating the games that they want to. And Devil May Cry 5 is part of that legacy, and a big piece of it is because, Devil May Cry 4 and DMC, the re-release, or I guess re-envisioning of Devil May Cry, didn't sell, they sold good, but they didn't like blow it out of the water. And actually Itsuo, who is the director and kind of vision head behind a lot of games at Capcom, and including his involvement in the Devil May Cry series, he was under the impression that he wasn't sure if there was going to be another Devil May Cry game, but ultimately Capcom said, no, we're pretty satisfied with the sales for these games, and so we're going to move on to allowing you to make a fifth one. And not only did they do that, but they really gave the team the funds in order to really create the next generation version of this series. And so that's all really cool information when we go through it. One of the things I want to share is my copy here. This copy is pretty interesting. It's actually the PAL version of the game from the UK. Got that nice little PEGI 18 logo at the bottom. Sorry if there's a little reflection there. And this is the special edition version. It came out in later 2020 and includes a whole extra playable character, Virgil, which is pretty cool. And also this is the PlayStation 5 version, as you can see, which means that it runs better, it looks better, it runs faster, it looks better. And a nice thing about it as well is all of that additional content is actually on the disc. So, there's no need to worry about messing around with some little paper pamphlet in here that someone might have already used and so on. You just pop the disc in, you install it, and for physical editions that are complete with additional DLC and stuff, that's always highly respected when they include those kind of things, because it means that really they're not trying to get around people buying used games. But I get a pretty good deal on this at like $20, which is why I ended up picking up this PEGI UK version of the game. And so just to share a little bit about the story, this is the 6th installment overall in the Devil May Cry series, and it takes place a few years after the events of Devil May Cry 4. I'm not a huge DMC person. I think my exposure to the series really comes down to one pivotal moment, which is me watching Cinematheque on G4, many years ago, and seeing probably the Devil May Cry 2 trailer, which was very entertaining. And I always did want to try the game. I just never got the opportunity to really dig into it. But recently I've gotten my hands on the HD collection of Devil May Cry 1 through 3 that came out on PlayStation 3, and I'm hoping to dig into that. But as I was moving into playing the more recent Final Fantasy games, one of the interesting things about Final Fantasy 16 is that the combat director, he was also kind of leading the efforts for Devil May Cry 5, and I wanted to experience this game and check it out before I moved on to that game, so I could kind of see how the combat is similar, how it's different. And so that's why I picked this up and played it, though I hadn't really been into the DMC series so far. So this game follows 3 characters. So you have Dante, and Nero, and V. And they're on basically a mission to stop Demon King Urizen from destroying the world. And the story's actually a lot more in depth than just that. You learn some things about Urizen, and you kind of follow these three characters and learn much about them across the game as well, in terms of their role in the story, in terms of their role in everything kind of happening on the world right now. And I would say a couple things about the story. When I first booted this up on PlayStation 5, there was an option that would auto-load the next chapter once something loads through and so on. And the problem with that is, you know, through the cutscenes and as you move chapter to chapter, you get these little summaries about kind of what's going on in the game. And I didn't realize this auto-load feature was a thing until it was kind of too late. So the problem with it was I would be reading this summary, or at least trying to, but on the PlayStation 5, the game loads so fast that I would miss all of that extra detail. And so some point halfway through the game, I was like, I don't really know what's going on because I'm missing these summaries, and the cutscenes are not particularly informative on the overall narrative that's happening right there in the moment. At least in my experience, they were more like, you know, walking into a scene, or there's a big monster and we're kind of preempting the epic battle you're about to undergo. And so from a story lens, I had to go back and kind of revisit these text notes on what was happening across the story. And later on in the game, you know, things really open up. The levels get a little bigger. They become much more focused on just providing you a gameplay experience. And they kind of put a little bit of the story to the wayside. Once that started to happen, I really felt maybe like investing in the story was not overly important, and so that's kind of was my trajectory in terms of my enjoyment of the story. I kind of missed out on, I think, some big parts of it to really fill in the gaps of my understanding of what was going on. And especially having missed the first 4 games, you know, that's kind of difficult. So I would recommend that if you're going to play this game, do a couple things. Turn off auto-load. So unlike me, you can actually read these summaries and kind of be filled in on what's going on throughout the course of the game. And then also just familiarize yourself with the first 4 titles. You know, what's happened, who are these people, and so on. I think it will definitely inform your enjoyment of the game. But the story did, in my opinion, seem a little light. You're just on this mission to go and destroy the Demon King, and it'll take you through parts of this destroyed city as you kind of make your way towards that objective overall. But story aside, where this game really shines is in its gameplay. 3 characters that are playable, and they all play very, very differently. From what I understand, Dante plays a lot like his character in DMC3, and he has your pretty standard melee attacks, and he has dual wielding pistols, and throughout the course of the game you'll get a lot of different weapons for these characters. Nero, on the other hand, he has a sword, and he's missing his arm. He has something called the Devil Breaker, and the Devil Breaker can be a million things. There's all sorts of little items and pickups that you can basically attach a new type of prosthetic to your arm. I guess kind of like in Sekiro, you know how you can have different prosthetics that give Nero a variety of abilities that you can use in the gameplay, and also in ways to like traverse the environment and so on and so forth. And then there's V, who actually doesn't have a weapon. He uses spirits, shadows that help him to fight enemies, and V kind of finishes the enemy off at the end of whenever their kind of HP is run out, or whatever you want to call it. And I would say that I was so engaged in this gameplay because while of course the developers have created styles for all the weapons and created all the animations and attack moves that you can do, I still think even in that there was a lot of expression and creativity in the way in which you fight enemies and the way in which you apply the various weapons and customizations you will be given throughout the course of the game for every character. And so I found that to be very impressive, because you would think for an action game, really your goal is to learn a set number of skills or patterns that will help you to really fight enemies in the most efficient way. But I really felt like there was an opportunity in Devil May Cry to continue to express myself in how I want to fight these enemies. And some of this does become uneven. You know, you'll play Dante a lot more in the later chapters of the game, And almost every chapter, Dante is getting a new weapon to apply. And so it did kind of become hard to really familiarize myself with each weapon as I went across those chapters. However, again, once you've beaten the game and you have the chance to kind of go back, reload levels, and just kind of experiment and see how the weapons work, there was a lot of fun to be had in that experience. And I did quite enjoy the combat in those lenses. Outside of the combat itself, the gameplay mostly consists of you traversing an environment in a linear fashion to kind of make it to the next objective. And honestly, a lot of the objectives are just move forward and kill the demons, and you're kind of on this mission walking towards where Urizen is currently on his throne. I did find the environments to be visually not particularly interesting. I think a lot of the environments were mostly kind of urban decay and destroyed city environments, underground or up in buildings or so on and so forth. In the later half of the game, you'll actually go into basically Urizen's like giant fortress, I guess, which is like this blood and gore fortress. And when you get there, I think visually the game becomes very interesting and stunning in a lot of ways, just how detailed and crazy the environments look. And so I really did think that was cool. But for the first half of the game, I was really kind of questioning, am I going to enjoy this? Am I enjoying this? I mean, visually, the game's not really capturing me too much. It kind of felt generic in some ways, but I think towards the later half of the game, it really picks up, and you get a lot of entertainment out of it. Music is very cool in this game. A lot of the music, especially in combat, is driven by how good you're doing in combat. And so it'll start with just like a little riff or something like that, and then as you kind of build up to your master, your sick combo or whatever the high level combos, you'll kind of get the full instrumentation of these songs. For some of these characters like V, I found it pretty easy to maintain a super high combo because V's character allows for you to almost button spam attacks if you really want to. And so one thing that will happen is if you are playing like that and you're not finding a lot of variance in your combo abilities, what will occur is you'll hear this same piece of music over and over across all the battles. And so that is something that I just kind of picked up over time as I was playing the game, and I was like, okay, well, that's fine. But the music that was playing was very good, and I really enjoyed it. Graphically, this game's beautiful. On the special edition version for PS5, I was playing it at 60 frames. I think the game might come in at 4K. Don't quote me on that, please. But just in the technical aspects, I think the characters look very realistic. The enemies look insane. Like, the level of detail is super cool on them, and they're very creatively designed. And it was just a treat in a lot of ways to look at from a graphical, technical sense. And there was, the game's a few years old now, so there was like a little checkerboarding, or there were places where you could clearly tell, like, okay, this isn't real. But I was very impressed with how far they really took the visual look of Devil May Cry 5, the special edition. Overall, pretty fun game. Clocked in maybe 12, 13 hours overall in the game, I believe. It was an engaging play. I thought the story was pretty light for me. I didn't really get too much out of it, but I think it's because I was missing a lot of context throughout, unfortunately. The gameplay was fantastic. It was so creative, innovative. There are some hitches in there, like a lot of the weapons and variability you'll get later in the game. You really have to go through and play like the Bloody Palaces in order to really take advantage of learning those. The world design was a little flat until later in the game as well. Musically, the music in the game is great, especially some of like the contemporary styles of sounds and stuff that they use. But in the combat, you'll get some repetitive riffs and things that you'll hear over and over again. But graphically, the game is gorgeous. I thought it was really cool to play. I had not played an action game like this in a while, and to just see how far an action game could go, it really felt innovative, and I continue to be impressed by Capcom's output in these last over this last decade. So those are my thoughts on the game. I thought it was pretty decent overall. I'd like to know what you think about DMC5, especially if you are a long-term fan of the Devil May Cry series. I'm curious from a newcomer's perspective. That's how I feel, and I'm curious to see if you've been around and you've enjoyed this series for a long time, what your perspective is on this game. But overall, I think a lot of fans rate DMC5 up there as probably one of the best, and I can understand why. It was a great jump-in point for me into the series, and so I was really happy I got to play it. All right, well, that's all my thoughts on the game, and appreciate you tuning in, and take care. I'll see you all next time.